Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about corporate innovation and entrepreneurship. My name is Steve Glaveski, and each week I'll bring you authors, corporate innovation managers, entrepreneurs, and above all else, thought leaders on the topics of innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement. Future Squared brings you a double dose of innovation inspiration every week to help you successfully navigate your innovation journey. Every Monday, I'll bring you a world-class thought leader such as Steve Blank, Alex Osterwalder, Neil Patel, Rand Fishkin, or Whitney Johnson, just to name a few. While every Friday, I'll bring you some quick digestible insights myself to help end your week on a high before you head off for the weekend. Future Squared is proudly brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation hub, school, and consultancy that works with large organizations to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies, and tools required to explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. If your organization needs support coming up with ideas, testing and turning those ideas into reality, incubating teams, driving cultural change, or connecting and partnering with startups, then visit Collective Campus online at www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future Squared. Today I'll be speaking with Justin Lokitz. He's an experienced strategy consultant and business designer responsible for the Business Models Inc. office in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. He supports organizations by getting teams to think broadly and expansively about their own strategies and business models. Using his power to connect the dots, Justin has an impressive ability to get organizations thinking like startups and industry disruptors. What's more, through his expert facilitation skills, Justin has a proven track record of guiding organizations to aha moments. With 15 plus years of experience of managing products and business model strategies for large multinational corporations like Autodesk and Oracle, as well as small startups, Justin leverages his experience across a wide range of industry sectors to help large companies think, innovate, and design more like startups, while helping startups find sustainable business models. Whether he's helping teams innovate, scale new products, or create sustainable strategies for the future, Justin does so by making strategy design an engaging experience. Justin holds a BA in Environmental Science and Geography from University of California, Santa Barbara, an MBA in Design Strategy from California College of the Arts, as well as professional certifications in software development and product management from the University of California, Berkeley. So with that, it gives me much pleasure to bring you Justin Lokitz. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you very much, Steve.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program. You're joining us all the way from not so sunny San Francisco.
That's exactly right. At least the closest part of the mainland U.S. to you, I think. So here we are.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. So look, before we get right down into it, I did some digging, or deep diving, I suppose, into your background and some of your interests, as I like to do with a lot of my guests. And I know you're into the outdoors, you're into coffee, beer, wine, and travel. I think this was on your LinkedIn. So pretty broad options there, especially travel. But coffee, are you a filter coffee man or?
You know what? Actually, I am an any coffee man. I would say on a daily basis at home, I'm a French press guy. I really, really love the French press, only because I think, having the grounds that close to the actual coffee and even part of the coffee experience is a big deal for me. So I also really like dark black coffee, nothing else added to it. But, if I go out, then it's espressos, and, I think probably last on the list would be a filter guy. Yep. Yeah,
fair enough. And being from SF, would that make you a customer of Blue Bottle coffee, or? Is that me being generic and generalizing?
Steve, that's generalizing quite a bit. No, I certainly like Blue Bottle. But there's a ton of really good coffee here. Although, I have to say, some of my favorite coffee in the world is in Australia. My favorite cup of coffee, I think, best of all time, was in Sydney about 12 years ago. So never forget it.
Right. Well, look, being from Melbourne, I don't know how I feel about that, but you're definitely right. I mean, I've traveled around the world, much like yourself, and I have to say the coffee in Melbourne, Sydney, to a certain degree, but I think Melbourne is just more plentiful wherever you go. Within a 500 meters walking distance of my office, there's at least 10 awesome cafes. But
there you go.
Let's not digress too much from the topic of conversation today. Thanks for giving up some time. I guess we're here to talk about Design a Better Business, which is a
Hmm.
new book you put together with a few of the guys from Business Models Inc. So
That's correct.
let me see if I can get this pronunciation correct. Patrick Vanderpeel, is that right?
That's right. Yeah,
Perfect.
Vanderpyle. That's right.
Vanderpyle. I'm just trying to be as authentic as I can with the Dutch surname, right? um,
I get it.
yeah, so they contributed previously to business model generation, and also had something to do with value proposition design, I believe, with Alex Osterwalder, a much lauded name in the startup and innovation literature ecosystem, I guess, if you will. But Design a Better Business. So this book, I actually came across it last week. I was flying from Brisbane to Melbourne. It was in the Brisbane airport, one of the bookstores in the airport there, and keeping good company alongside the likes of Eric Ries and so on. So congratulations. Looks
Great.
like the book is making the rounds in all good bookstores.
It is. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're really excited about that.
Yeah, and I would definitely be excited about it. And also, I guess the book is all about tools, skills, and mindsets for strategy and innovation. So I guess first up, how did the book come about?
Yeah, so the book came about, I think there's probably a few stories swirling around because everyone, everyone on our little team, between Patrick and me and Lisa and Eric and Martin, who are all co-creators of this book,
Hmm.
I think we all have slightly different versions. But really, what happened here was Patrick was the producer behind Business Model Generation. He really helped to make that book happen.
Hmm.
And ever since then, the publisher Wiley has sort of been on him to follow that up. And of course, Alex Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur, who are the authors of
Hmm.
that book, have certainly gone down some paths with value proposition design and another book. But Wiley had been after Patrick to do sort of some follow up on this same topic of strategy. So it sort of came time eventually. Hey, why don't we write a book? We have a good team to do that, and it's about time.
Mm.
And that's kind of where it started. It started with really Patrick and Eric and Martin, sort of coming up with a few concepts. And then I entered the picture originally as an editor,
Hmm.
and then quickly became an author. Given that I was the English speaker of that small team, and then
Uh-huh.
Lisa came along as another sort of co-creator of this book, and it just formed as a team. And I think the what became Design a Better Business really came out of this team, although it started as a kernel from this publisher Wiley wanting a follow-up to Business Model Generation about strategy,
Mm.
and here we are.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess on that, when it comes to strategy and innovation, obviously there's no shortage of books out there. What can readers expect to take out of Design a Better Business that they won't find elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, what you find out there a lot are really great books. So you mentioned, Eric Ries,
Mm.
and so you think about Lean and, Lean Startup, and you think about, the Sprint that came from the Google Ventures guys, as well as, books that come from Steve Blank and everyone else.
Hmm.
There's tons of great stuff out there, plus the ones I mentioned before that sort of led to this book, all great stuff. And what you find are often really focused, I'd call it sort of the T mentality. So, books that sort of touch a lot of things, but go, it's sort of a couple inches wide, but go a mile deep on one particular subject.
Right.
And that is certainly the case of Lean, which is great. And even Google Sprint, really, Sprint, great stuff. And what we wanted to take here was a different approach, which was, since the deep parts, the focus is in all these other places, what if we took learnings from everything, from other books, from real life, which, frankly, there are not many books that talk about real life case studies and scenarios where you use different tools, where you
Mm.
have some of these different focus areas, whether it's lean or using business model canvases or creating visions or whatever it might be. We wanted to bring those things all together to give real context about how you might use all of these things together,
Hmm.
and how you might back those up with case studies from real companies and many big companies as well as startups. How these big companies also, in their own cultures, use some of these things together, not just one book or another book or the tools from these books.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference here: is that This is about creating recipes, recipes that enable people to create strategy or a SWOT or a vision for the future or a pitch deck or whatever it might be
Hmm.
by pulling resources from other places, by pulling case studies from other places, and by pulling real world experience that the five of us on this team really have.
Yeah, and that is often the question that people ask, whether it is a book, whether it is a presentation or a keynote of some type. When people talk about methodology, I guess the audience generally wants to know, okay, how has this been applied? Where has it been applied? What have the outcomes been? And by listening to stories and seeing case studies, they're far more likely to consolidate their understanding of these methodologies. And I know you mentioned Steve Blank and Alex Osterwelder and other people like Nancy Duarte has
Yeah,
contributed her insights to this book on storytelling, and Rob Fitzpatrick on questioning.
right.
I guess what kind of insights stuck out from some of these big thought leaders?
Yeah, yeah. I think, I think in many ways we were hoping to have these big insights. We went after these thought leaders, kind of knowing where they sort of belonged in the
Mm,
book. So, for instance, the Nancy Duarte, she's amazing, and her thoughts and her thought leadership around storytelling
hmm
are well known. She really is a global thought leader in that realm. And what stood out, for instance, in her piece there, in her sidebar in the book, was sort of storytelling with a big S.
mm,
It really is designing stories that have impact that sort of allow you to exchange the value you're looking to exchange with someone, or get them to onto your side.
mm,
Um, Another one that I really really liked in the book was Steve Blank's. It's at the end,
yeah.
and in that case, he's talking about something that really is just starting to be used, is this idea of, he thinks about it as Moneyball here in the U.S. in baseball terms.
Mm,
But how could you quantify where a startup is in their life as a startup, or whether it's an internal to a big company, or external as a real little sort of scrappy startup?
hmm
How might you quantify how far they've gone and how valuable is what they're doing? And it's
Yeah.
really hard to say, right? And so here he's got this little sidebar and a part of a contribution to an article there, with his own tool called the investment readiness level, that really takes that concept in a really interesting direction. And we're really super pleased with his writing on that topic and his willingness to sort of
Mm.
contribute.
Yeah, and I think that would be incredibly valuable, particularly for large organizations who tend to see the world through a lens of certainty and predictability when it comes to investing in, whether it's investing in internal projects or startups. And when you are building something new, oftentimes it's all about the learnings. And so, how do you
Yep.
quantify that investment readiness level when a startup may, say, not be generating the type of returns that really matter to these large organizations, but they have done a lot of they've made a lot of progress when it comes to learning
Right.
and finding that product market fit.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly.
Um, so I guess the tool deeps dive or deeps dive dives deep into a
Sure.
few other areas such as mindset and tools.
Uh-huh.
I guess on tools, what kind of tools can our audience expect to take out of the book? And I imagine there is some sort of a download associated with that.
There are, yeah. So there are 20 different tools in this book.
Hmm
Some which, probably everyone has seen before. Things like the business model canvas and value proposition canvas and so forth. So, there are some tools that many people have seen, but there are another big set of tools that are ones that, companies like The Grove, also out here in the U.S.,
Mm,
have used in their practice, as well as Business Models Inc., that we've been using in our practice for creating big visions for the future and things like that. But also tools that you might find from Ash Mara, who wrote some of a bunch of the lean startup
yeah.
methodology. So experiment canvases and things like that. So again, you can sort of imagine that this book is about taking a design journey and taking a designer's lens,
Mm,
and then using each part of that journey, using having a set of tools to create your own recipe. So yeah, there are 20 tools in there. You can expect that anything from trying to understand your customer or your business model to, like I said before, maybe even creating, designing stories, using Nancy Duarte's methodologies to, creating and capturing and recording experimentation and so forth. Those are all tools that are part of it, and we don't expect everyone to use everything. It's more about here's 20 different tools, and here are some different ways to mix these as part of a design journey, as maybe recipes to create a really thoughtful meal, if you want, if you think about it that way.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess with tools, I mean, they're only as good as how you use them. And on that,
That's right.
you strongly believe that design should be at the core of everything. And even this book, similar to, I guess you could call them predecessors, Business Model Generation, and books like Value Proposition Design that Alex Osterwalder put together with Yves Pigneur, they just have this really awesome design. Like they're just a treat to hold and look through, and such awesome imagery and everything else, as opposed to just walls of text. And I guess, was that an intentional play?
Absolutely, absolutely. We set out to make this book as a very visual tool guide. We actually, in fact, in creating this book, we sat down and we thought about different kinds of even customer segments, the same way you design a strategy, right? We thought about different customer segments, and many people, well, aren't going to read a book front to back, cover to cover, the way, especially if it's inside of a company and they're really busy. They may need the ability to flip to something interesting and pull a piece out of that. And we also thought about people that, that are just, well, everyone's visual, but people who are really visual that just need a little bit of context here, a little bit of something there, and need a really quick snippet of, hey, here's a tool. I'd like to try this right now. I don't have time to read a lot of text, but I do need to pick something up very quickly and just start to prototype in my own world with this tool or with what this person's saying. And so that was a very conscious decision on our part to, make this very visual, make things stand out, have different parts and pieces that you can read or take away something very quickly. Other parts are a little, deeper with more text and context behind them. And, I think in our own design journey, having prototyped this book close to 30 times, we're pretty happy with the result of what we have in the mix of visuals and text and color and everything else.
Wow! So you prototyped the book 30 times.
Yeah, we had our particular design challenge that we put on ourselves, by the way, when Wiley came back to us with the sort of the initial contract, let's say the draft contract for the book. They wanted it in 30 days, and our response to them was, at the time, well, that's just not going to happen. There's no way. But would you be willing to give us 100 days? And they said yes. And so we said, okay, well, as designers, how might you actually put out your best product in 100 days? It's probably not just to sit and write, for 90 of those days and hope for the best. It's probably to use a designer's mindset, a designer's set of tools, and really design the hell out of it and iterate as you go. And so it first started with Patrick and Eric and Martin, sort of designing some of the concepts and the learning journey, sort of the designer's journey, which started as islands and different configurations of when you might ideate or prototype or validate or whatever it might be. And then through some iterations of that, it turned into kind of what it is today with this, this idea of a double loop. And then when I got there, sort of within the first couple weeks of these guys sort of iterating with the initial concept, then I started writing chapters, starting with just case studies. And, our first case study, I think I did 6 rewrites of that in a matter of a week, full rewrites from top to bottom, case study. And then after that, we, I think every other case study, every section of the book, I think I wrote at least a few times, and sometimes up to 8 or 10. And I went with the designs, and the cover itself was prototyped 30 different times. So in total, yes, I think we had 30 or so iterations of everything at some point in time, from cover to cover.
Wow. So did you have external readers take part in this design process so you could base your iterations on their feedback? Or
we did, yeah. We had all, and they're all in the back of the book. We had a whole big list of external readers for every different piece of the book. We had external readers. We even had our own little sort of design hacks. For instance, for the covers, not only do we have external people sort of look at the cover of the book,
Mm.
because that's a really important thing. Here you see it's really bright yellow. Even that was made from sort of design process wherein Martin and Eric printed out a bunch of different covers, wrapped them around existing books,
Hmm.
like Business Model Generation, for instance, and then went into bookstores and sort of strategically, somewhat legally, placed them in bookstores to see how people reacted to the covers, right? So, every detail in the book was sort of, we had feedback,
Wow.
and we were able to iterate based on that.
Yeah, actually, that's really cool. So they wrapped the existing books up with the new cover and just kind of kept their distance and just observed how people coming through
Yeah,
the business section would interact.
that's
Oh,
exactly right.
that's
Yeah.
cool. Really cool. It's good to see that you guys are definitely practicing what you preach in putting this book together. So you mentioned earlier, you touched on a topic of busy executives in a large company probably won't have the time to read a book cover to cover. So they,
Right.
with design a better business, they'll open to a particular page, read what they need to read, get some insights, and go off and put it into practice. And I know you've worked with companies such as Oracle and Autodesk.
Yep.
And I guess this podcast predominantly deals with corporate innovation, and we like to deep dive into what organizations, what challenges they face when it comes to innovation, and we're clear on a lot of those. There's no secret as to what they are. Guys like Steve Blank have put out so much awesome thought leadership on the topic, but aside from that, what's it been like working with large organizations yourself in terms of some of the challenges and getting them to embrace, experimentation, bringing customers into the design process from day one, and so on?
Yeah, yeah. I think certainly that there are tons of challenges. You
Mm,
just said it. I can pull out a few examples, from what I've seen. So, on one hand, every company wants to do, a lot of what, for instance, is in this book, and wants to sort of think that they're innovative, and that they have ways, not if not the answers, they at least have ways of getting to the answers for the future, of creating new things for the future. And Autodesk, I think, by the way, is a really good example of a company that's really doing a good job
hmm.
infusing design into its culture. But having said that, some of the biggest challenges you see with especially large companies, is they still report to the street, and they still report to Wall
Yeah.
Street, and their shareholders
Hmm.
in the same way they did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And that puts a huge burden on everyone, but certainly puts a huge burden on the leadership, because what you find there is, the leadership can't say, without really being, pounded hard into the ground, and the stock probably taking a dive. Leadership can't go to the street and say, "Hey, we're prototyping 4 different strategies
Mm.
right now, and we believe we have 6 different options, and we're going to choose, out of those 4 strategies that we're prototyping, of the 6 different options, we're going to choose 1 or 2 for the future." They can't say that, right? They have
Hmm.
to say, "Hey, we know what we're doing. We have this strategy, and we have to play it out." And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. You do have to play out your strategies. You do have to execute on the things that you've decided to execute on,
Hmm.
to the best of your ability, because you also just can't turn, you can't turn a ship, without a lot of effort, right? It does take
Yeah.
a trim tab and to turn that big rudder. So that's a big challenge. And so, this is a place where I think Autodesk is doing a great job. I think Adobe is another company that's doing a terrific job. I've got a good friend there sort of running, one of their innovation labs. And,
Hmm.
and you see other big companies out there, Salesforce is another one, that have really wholeheartedly embraced design. And they've started to at least figure out how to speak to the street in a way that says, we know what we're doing, and we don't know exactly where we're going to go.
Mm.
But we're gonna do these things to get there. So, but that is a big challenge, and it will continue to be a big challenge, until the street also recognizes that there are no single right solutions. There are only ways to get to the next right, next right option.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Sorry,
You
you're
know, and
going
I
to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, and the one other challenge that I see is, again, now you talk about big companies. The one of the biggest challenges I see at most big companies is, there just are not enough people in the company that are willing or wanting or not scared of going and speaking directly with customers.
Mm,
And that's just really silly. I try to preach this because I've seen it. I've worked at these big companies as a product manager and running product lines, that in fact your best friend and your best partner in business are your customers, and they want to speak with you. In fact, when companies do go out and speak with their customers champion that company, and you become partners in business, and you can only build better things. The outcomes are only better.
mm,
So that's the other big challenge is often the unwillingness to accept uncertainty,
hmm
and go out and speak with your customers to help you figure out where are things more certain, where can we design something based on our uncertainty of the world.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think with people being a little bit hesitant when it comes to engaging customers early on, is that they're scared to hear the truth in terms of maybe they're perfectionists and they don't want customers to come back and say, well, no, I don't like that. Or maybe they just don't want to spend time actually going out there. They feel as if that's just not productive. I think humans
Hmm.
often have a tendency to just confuse effectiveness with movement, and they'd rather build the product than get out there and spend, say, a month, 2 months, 3 months actually engaging customers, at which point you're probably not building a finished product, but you're learning a hell of a lot. But to a lot of
Yeah.
people, it seems like they're not actually moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think there are a lot of blockers for people, and one is just, where do I start? Like, which
Mm,
customers? Where do I start? Especially if you're a big company, you have millions of customers. But frankly, it's if you sort of take a step back, what I find and what I've found is that it's sort of the uncertainty of it all, the uncertainty of getting out there. Where are my customers? What customers? Are we sure they're the right customers? Which ones would we talk to? Or
mm,
how do we know they're not all different? Whatever it might be. And when you retreat back behind your laptop, in your company, and you can read Gartner reports and Forrester, and you can get all this really cool data streamed
mm.
to you, and you pay a few $1,000s for it. Well, you find certainty in the numbers. You find certainty in, okay, at least the numbers. At least Gartner's telling me we're sort of on the right path. So
Yeah,
it's got to be right, right? And
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
here I can see that we have a total addressable market of 7 billion people worldwide. So hey, we must be on the right track. And so they sort of retreat from uncertainty and bury themselves in the certainty of some numbers which are very meaningless.
Mm.
When, like you said, they really could have just taken 2 weeks and very little money and sometimes free effort, and speak with 5 people, and they would probably have a better idea of what's going on in the world, and certainly with their products.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've touched on a lot of points, and I could take this in lots of different directions now. But that whole looking at the world through the lens of certainty and that linear growth and relying on numbers, so then you can actually,
Hmm.
whether you're a middle manager reporting to a senior manager or someone lower down the ranks in a company reporting to a middle manager, you want to peg back every decision to numbers,
That's
because
right.
then it says, well, you've done your research. Whereas pegging it back to some interviews perhaps won't hold the same weight as an IBIS World report or a Gartner report, or
That's right.
yeah, it's interesting. It's also, I think there's similarities there with a lot of companies engaging huge consultancies to do some work, and therefore, if something goes wrong, it's like, well, we engaged McKinsey to look at this, so hey, we did our job.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, don't get me wrong. You also have to have the numbers, right?
Yeah.
You can't find a sort of a product market fit without numbers that sort of represent the market.
hmm
But how do you get to that market if you don't really know who the people in that market are? I think that's the step that people jump over, is that sort of problem solution fit area. That's the part they typically jump over, and that's because it's uncertain, and they are not sure who or how to speak with
Mm,
customers, and so they just jump straight to the data, and there's a fatal flaw in there for sure.
definitely. And I recently interviewed Karen Dillon, who co-wrote Clayton Christensen's new book,
Yeah.
Competing Against Luck. And we were talking
Hmm.
about how a lot of companies rely on attributes such as demographics, household income, age, location, etc., which is a good starting point. But it's not going to tell you why a customer chose between product A and B, which is often has more to do with the customer job to be done, the underlying
Yes.
problem, and many other factors which won't be captured in an IBISWorld report.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You would use that IBIS World report to maybe give you an idea of how many of a particular customer in the world, but that's exactly right. It would
Mm,
never tell you why someone did what they did. And if you don't know why someone did what they did, certainly you can't really know what might be better, right?
mm.
What job could I actually help them get done, get done if I looked at the world through their eyes, or sort of added my own filter to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And just to step back to the short-termism you spoke of in large companies and being accountable to the street, I imagine you're familiar with Eric Ries's new sort of venture that he's talking about, the long-term stock exchange.
I am. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, first of all, I think Eric's he's a really smart dude. I think the idea that the idea that you can't just place you shouldn't just be placing daily bets on something
Mm,
as a sort of a day trader, based on what your report says this month, or this quarter versus the report next quarter versus the report next quarter,
mm,
right? I think he's right. I think, having the ability to sort of look at the long term, and this, by the way, also you think about what Steve Blank is saying with his investment readiness level, right? Having real numbers to back up a strategy and where it's going in the long term makes a ton of sense.
yeah.
So I totally agree with Eric in that case. And of course, at the end of the day, how might we actually prototype the long term stock exchange, and start to get it out there and actually start to get real momentum behind it? I think is another challenge in and of itself, but a good one. I think it's a worthy one.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, by encouraging long-term investments, we're going to encourage innovation that creates more impact and value in the world rather than just looking for those quick wins and ways to stretch our existing S curves.
Yeah, totally,
Mm,
totally.
excellent. Cool. Before we get into the lightning round, Justin, you recently wrote a blog post on 3 simple steps to understand your customers. And I think this would be quite valuable for our audience. Do you want to just walk us through those 3 steps?
Yeah, should I should suppose I first have to remember what the three steps were.
Well, maybe I should Google it while I've got you on the phone.
Yeah, I will. I'll take a look. I'll take a look too. But I think, um, in general, if you're trying to understand your customers better, you know, you have to get out there, right?
Yeah.
You have to get out there and actually visit your customers, visit where they are, see what they're actually getting into, and I think the jobs to be done framework
Mm,
is absolutely the right one, right? What are my customers trying to get done in their lives?
hmm.
What gets in the way, and really what are their ambitions beyond that, right? And I think, by the way, I think the ambitions piece is what most people miss. They're typically solving for some pain.
Yeah.
But the key in all of this is that you can, and let's go back a little bit to the uncertainty piece, is
Hmm.
that when you go out and visit customers, you don't have to go out there and think that, hey, I've got to have the answers and I must find exactly the right customers, and I better have the best conversation right away. It all starts with observing your customers first, right?
Hmm.
How might you go somewhere where you believe your customers are? Now, you do have to be, you don't want to just go somewhere randomly, right? You do want to set up real um, uh, uh, tests, real sort of validatable tests, if that's a
Hmm.
word. Something you can really go out there and validate, just like you would any other science experiment. But then, your first step would be, okay, could I go observe them? What are my
Hmm.
customers doing? How could I just see what they're doing? You mentioned, hey, the bookstore, and I said, yeah, we put books in the bookstore.
Hmm.
Yeah, we just wanted to see what people did. We didn't really, it wasn't that we had a bias towards wanting them to buy the book. In fact, we didn't care because we couldn't buy the book at that point. It was really just about how might we observe them in their natural habitat, in our case, a bookstore, but in the case of a supermarket, maybe the supermarket or some other place or a convenience store for that matter. And how might we sort of observe them in their natural habitat? What are they doing? How are they acting? Are they always looking at their phones? Are they reading labels? Whatever they're doing, do they seem to be attracted to a shape or a color or something else? So if we can do that, then it's about asking them questions, and it's about asking the right questions. I think asking the right questions is well, this is a little bit harder to do, but it's really figuring out how can I ask them open-ended questions. How can I dig into something that really matters to what they're actually getting into, to the choices they're making, and then asking enough why questions. Well, why do you think that? Yeah. Tell me more. Yeah. How does that make you feel? Tell me the last time you did that. Who are other people that do this in your life? Can you tell me a little bit more about them? And then finally, I think the key, and I mentioned this a moment ago, is that often we see, we think about design as solving some pain, right? Allowing us to or allowing our customers anyways to overcome some hurdle in their life or hurdle of, between them and their jobs to be done. And that's fine. But it turns out that the best selling products of all time in the biggest markets, the things like the iPhone were not the originators of solving pain in those areas, right? Before the iPhone, for instance, there were Blackberries and Treos, both of which I had, and all kinds of cool Nokias and Motorola Razors and everything else under the sun, that most of which, in fact, certainly the smartphones, the Treos and the Blackberries, already did everything the iPhone does today, really just about everything, except they didn't solve for people's ambitions. They only solved for pains. They didn't address people's need to look stylish or to feel that, to be able to design their lives in this very digital way, but design their lives on their digital device, and to co-create or curate their, sort of their digital persona in that device in a very unique way for each person. These other phones, they did a good job in solving for the pains of, hey, I don't want to carry a camera. I want to have my music. I want to write emails or text or whatever. But they didn't look at people's ambitions. And I think that's the third piece here in understanding customers is you don't want to just ask questions about pain. You want to figure out how might I uncover their hidden ambitions, their dreams of the future, so that when I'm designing something for them, that I'm not just designing the pain reliever, but I'm actually creating the gain creator. I'm creating something that's going to help them achieve a higher plane, higher state of existence.
Yeah, and that I guess comes out of Alex Osterwalder's value proposition design, not only solving pains, right, but creating gains, and tying that back then to the customer job to be done, where that framework becomes so powerful because the customer job to be done, it could be more than just functional. And like you alluded to, the Nokia phones, the Motorola Razor and so on, very much about the functional jobs, but not so much looking at the emotional or social jobs that people have and wanting to expand their social networks and look cool and feel great and all the rest of it that those earlier phones really didn't cater for.
That's exactly right. And I think that's just one single, iPhone. It's probably cliche at this point, but it's one single, but I think a powerful example because everything on the iPhone existed before the iPhone. Yeah, we didn't have the music stores the way we have it, right? Or, and some of those things, but those are part of this ambition piece, certainly. But, that's, frankly, it's a really good example, and you could use it over and over again of, hey, it isn't just about gains. It's our pains. It's about the ambitions, the gains as well. Yeah. And I totally believe Alex and I. I'm a big proponent of that of designing value propositions in that way.
Yeah, definitely. And as you were saying, unless you ask the right questions, you're not going to uncover the opportunities that Apple uncovered with the iPhone.
Yeah, that's right. And it goes right back to what we said about the data before, right? Observing customers also doesn't come from data, but certainly asking customers questions, you don't get that from data. You can only ask customers questions, and you can only ask the data about trends.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, well, look, that wraps up the formalities, Justin. But before I let you go, I've got to put you through our lightning round. Are you ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock.
Let's do it. Okay, so question number one is, if you could work for any company at any stage of the company lifecycle, who would it be and why?
Any company, any stage of its life cycle.
Any
I think
stage.
I would have worked for Google, employee number 100. Yeah.
Oh
How
yeah,
about that? And why? Is that
yeah,
what you wanted as well?
yes.
Why? Because I think there was no better time to have been in part of Google's core team, and number 100 would be, well, now you have at least enough resources and enough ability to jump on really cool projects with really cool teams, and not just one single team with one single mission.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, you'd be able to fund the rest of your life in every cool project in every way, and that you'd have a lot of cool contacts to be able to use to bring those things to bear. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, Google employee number 100 would have been really cool.
Hmm. Excellent answer. And question number two is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
Let's see. Any person, dead or alive. This is a lightning round, and I
It
guess I'm
is
a little.
lightning round. But I can
Uh,
always, edit out a long pause.
all right. So, any person, dead or alive. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think. Okay. I think I would love to talk with Nikola Tesla
Hmm.
about some of his theories of the future. And really, I'm not sure I'd have one question for him, but I would love to know, what some of his theories of the future were. And he's got lots of written ones, but what did he really think was real, and why did he think some of the things that he sort of brought about in the world, and perhaps even invented? Why did he think those things were real?
Mm,
And I think maybe, a proxy. If I couldn't get a hold of Tesla, I could have asked Leonardo da Vinci the same thing.
yeah.
Where do these ideas come from? How are you creating these things, and what vision for the future do you really have?
Yeah. Excellent. And I guess you would have preferred Tesla before he locked himself up in a room and surrounded himself with cats.
Well, yeah, and I like cats, but yeah,
Yeah.
probably before then. Sure, sure.
Excellent. Excellent. And finally, Justin, question is on lifestyle design. Do you have any rituals or routines to help you stay on top of your game?
I do. I'm a very ritualistic person.
Hmm.
So people who you'll talk to that maybe talk about me will say, well, I certainly separate my work life from my personal life.
Hmm.
In fact, when I was going to school, I had two laptop bags with two different laptops
Well.
because I couldn't mix the two.
Hmm.
But in an everyday, now that I'm no longer in school and I have sort of this sort of singular pathway, yeah, I do have lots of rituals. So I get up every morning at 5, and I go work out or do some kind of exercise, and it doesn't really matter to me as long as I'm up.
Hmm.
I meditate for 20 minutes. I do that twice a day. Do that in the morning and the evening. I typically eat the same thing every single day during the work week.
Hmm.
Not only is it easy, but because I figured out what makes me feel good and gives me energy throughout the day, and I'd rather not mix that up with anything else. I have 1 cup of coffee about 2.5, 3 hours after I've woken up.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and then at night I do this. I sort of power down in a similar way. I come home, I sort of power down. I meditate again for another 20
Hmm.
minutes, about an hour before dinner.
Any type of meditation or?
It is. I do transcendental meditation. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
TM. Cool.
yeah. TM.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I've heard a lot about TM. I'm more into the mindfulness meditation, but would you? I guess you would recommend it, given that you do it 2 times a day for 20 minutes.
I would. Yeah. Then again, I have never really tried anything else. So
Mm,
this one works for me, and that's all I can say about it. But it does. It works for me, and it's definitely sort of given me something else. It's hard to describe, but it's given me some extra sort of central calm,
mm.
or maybe even a force field around my central calm that I don't think I had before,
Yeah, and that calm is just so important
for
in
sure.
not only just in your professional life, but in your personal life, because it is just so easy. There's so many distractions out there, and so many things that can just set you off on a tangent if you're not calm and not noticing those little external influences.
For sure, and if nothing else, that's what meditation's for. It's being able to not act on every single distraction. And today,
Mm.
that's all we have are distractions. And so I've definitely found that, it's sort of like water rolls off my back with a lot of these distractions. It's not a big deal when things happen, and that's okay. You just move forward, and I think meditation certainly helps with that.
Fantastic. Cool. So where can our audience go to find out a little bit more about yourself, about Business Models Inc., and to pick up a copy of Design a Better Business?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the last part first is you can go to Amazon.com for Design a Better Business. In fact, I'm on there now. The price has dropped. The book's doing really, really well, and somehow their algorithm has dropped the price a bunch, which is good for everyone else. And I think is a really good time to buy the book, by the way. So Amazon.com to buy the book, or Barnes and Noble, or you can find them in airports now as well. If you happen to be in an airport, you can also go to for my own professional work, businessmodelsinc.com. And we also have a U.S. version of that called businessmodelsinc.us, which has sort of our little local team here. And I'm always invite people to connect via LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn at JM as in Michael Lokitz, Lokitz. Always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn and carry this conversation forward. I love speaking with people and understanding what drives them and moves them forward, and helping if I can, and helping in any way that makes sense. So any three of those channels would be fine.
Excellent. Cool.
And as well as Twitter, by the way, of course. So same JM Lokitz on Twitter is my handle.
Excellent. Cool. Well, we'll include all of those resources and links in the show notes for our listeners. So, look, thanks again for giving up some time this evening over in San Francisco, early evening, I guess, late afternoon. You've been an awesome guest, and I'm sure our audience will take quite a few little nuggets of wisdom out of that. So thanks again. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks, Steve, and have a great rest of your day, too.
Cheers. Well, that's it for my chat with Justin. Be sure to check out a copy of Designing a Better Business on Amazon. As always, if you're picking up what we're putting down, we'd love it if you took just a second of your time, okay, maybe 10 to 15 seconds, to like, share, or subscribe to Future Squared on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. It would mean a lot to the team who work tirelessly to bring you content such as this, as well as blogs, webinars, videos, and so on, which you can access at www.collectivecamp.us. Until next time, Future Squared out.